Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. Breaking news, in fact, a ton to report today because there is a lot happening energetically. We just got out of a G3 geomagnetic storm. The storming is still going, but that big pulse of G3 activity, which is a strong geomagnetic storm, that has come to a close. After that occurred, we had a magnitude 6.9 earthquake strike the Philippines. And now, just within an hour as I'm recording this, we just had a magnitude 6.0 earthquake strike Indonesia near the island of Bali. So two big earthquakes hit Southeast Asia today. And well, that's one of the things I talked about in yesterday's live stream as to how these sort of geomagnetic fluctuations can induce very powerful electric currents in Earth's surface, and if those hit faults that are at critical stresses, that could be an agent of destabilization, and then we get that rupture. Seems that's exactly what happened today. At least there is a clear connection in time between this G3 geomagnetic storm, the main phase of it, and then the earthquakes. And in addition to that, sunspots are still exploding on the sun. We're around 190, 200. We have some big sunspots that will soon be Earth facing direct in the next day or two. And that's a transit that will last all the way through about October 3rd when we have that close approach of 3I Atlas to Mars. We also just had a big plasma filament blast off from the southwest limb of the sun that does not appear Earth directed, but like we saw back in March 28th, 2025, where we had this big X-class flare and coronal mass ejection launched from the sun that corresponded with the magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar. There was an aftershock. There was a 6.6 and a 6.2 earthquake that also struck a spreading ridge in the ocean. It seems that we get these sometimes spikes in activity that are not only reflected here on Earth, but also across the solar systems, primarily with the sun. So that's what's happened today. Big solar activity, big geomagnetic activity, and big earthquake activity. All that and more in today's video. Now, before we get into it, I have two announcements for you. The first is that Interstellar Object 3I Atlas is now basically outside of range of Earth observation. So it's getting close enough to the sun that we really can't see it. And so that means that we are now reliant on all the telescopes that are outside of that Earth observation range. Specifically, there's a bunch of equipment we have on Mars that hopefully we'll get some good imagery of it on October 3rd. This is the Interstellar 3I Atlas long sleeve t-shirt, 100% cotton, artwork on the back by my father. This is available on the website, quickly become one of the best sellers. So if you like to pick one up before we have the superior conjunction of 3I Atlas or the perihelion, then I recommend you do so. It ships out pretty quick. They are printed to order, and those are available at www.earthevolution.com/store. The other thing is that we also just mixed up a big new batch of herb coffee, which is the second bestseller on the website because you guys absolutely love this stuff. I do too. It's 50% single origin organic coffee, and it also has roasted chicory root, roasted dandelion root, and lion's mane mushroom. All of it's all organic, and that combination is fantastic because you still get some caffeine, but it's 50% normal. And the roasted dandelion root, the roasted chicory root are really good for your microbiome, gut health. They're blood purifiers, just fantastic for your overall health. And the flavor profile of them matches perfectly with the coffee. And this coffee is so good. And then you also have 12.5% of this entire thing being organic lion's mane mushroom powder. So it's not just a sprinkling of dust like most of these other groups do. It's like 1/8 of this is lion's mane mushroom. So you're getting a fantastic deal, and that helps you get focused, and it also kind of opens up your mind and increases neuroplasticity. So the combination of all these things, the microbiome optimization, the stimulating and focusing and productive effects of the caffeine, and the lion's mane mushroom, which will help you rewire your brain, makes this perfect for if you're trying to learn any new skill. It helps like basically solve those energy crash problems of a normal cup of coffee because of the roots that are in there. And if you are doing some deep research or anything like that, you're trying to learn something, you're in school, whatever it is, you're watching my videos all the time, then this stuff is really awesome because you will pick up things so much faster. You'll learn quicker, and it also just helps you feel good and creative. So this is also available on the website www.earthevolution.com, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. So please check that out. Now, the first thing I want to jump in right away are these two earthquakes that have struck Southeast Asia. So we have here the Philippines. This is the 6.9. There have been aftershocks. That was felt pretty widespread, and that was quite a significant earthquake. And then we also have this magnitude 6 there, which is right near the island of Bali. The original estimate for that epicenter was right under Ubud, in fact, but the USGS has it pegged up a bit more over here. And there's a lot of volcanism in this area, as you can see. Look at this whole volcanic arc. So a big magnitude 6 earthquake near all these volcanoes in Indonesia, and then just nearby before that, we had this magnitude 6.9, and that was near the island of Cebu, and just near the very northern part there. So Bogo City, I've not been to this location, but I did have a subscriber immediately report with what they felt. They said they felt a ton of shaking, and that there's already been some like collapsed buildings, and there's an underground tunnel that something happened with it. And the infrastructure in these places often is not as good as you would hope it to be across the board. Of course, there's plenty of nice buildings and structures there, beautiful temples and more throughout Southeast Asia, but there's also a lot of very poorly built structures. And so 6.9 is a very strong earthquake, and we see aftershocks as well. We can set those there. We see 5.2, 5.0, 5.5. So a 6.9, we're looking at probably a magnitude 6 earthquake at the greatest for an aftershock. There is about a 5, maybe like 3 to 5% chance that this is a foreshock. Just intuition, I think that's probably the main event. We'll see. But aftershocks are typically 1 magnitude less. So take that up to about a magnitude 6 aftershock, probably sometime in the next 48 hours. And that just struck the Philippines. So look how crazy the geography and geology of the Philippines are. And in fact, just this entire zone is really, really wild. I think it's incredible. This magnitude 6 here in Bali, also quite a shaker, but not as much. So do you feel it? You see this right there? Did you feel it? That's only a 5. Whereas if you go back up to our big one, that was a 9. So a lot of people felt that. Is a yellow pager. That may upgrade to orange, meaning that there was quite a bit of damage. And I don't know about any sort of injuries or like death tally. That data is all coming in. This just happened the past few hours. So please say your prayers for everyone affected by these two earthquakes back to back. And I would say especially this one in the Philippines, because a 6.9 is nearly 32 times more energy than that magnitude 6. So it is a tremendous amount more of energy released. Though a magnitude 6 earthquake is quite significant, especially if that had been right under Denpasar or Ubud, something like that, that would really be significant. But thankfully, it looks like according to the USGS, it's more offshore. Our population centers, of course, in all these places, very highly dense population throughout these islands, but hopefully the damage wasn't that intense. So 2 big earthquakes, and they occurred right after this G3 geomagnetic storm. Let's check it out. I reported on this geomagnetic storm when it first started to come in. It was a bit of a surprise, though. There were some, you could say, stealthy coronal mass ejection signatures that were visible in the coronagraph imagery, but basically no one was forecasting there to be a G3 geomagnetic storm today. I do think I know the combination of factors that led to this. We'll just talk about that more in the video. Here we have our HB60 index. This is 10 days across the entire frame here, showing us the 1 hour measure of geomagnetic volatility. What they do is they look at all these ground-based magnetometers around the globe. They look at those magnetic field swings, and then they kind of average them and create this index. And so this is a 1 hour measure, whereas the KP index, which many people are familiar with, that's a 3 hour measure. You can see that we had a G3 storm for 3 hours right there. But we get higher resolution if you go to our HB60 index, which is why I prefer this. We see how this started to ramp up. We had this pulse. This is where I did my live stream yesterday. Went back down, boom, right there. That was last night. I put out an update on Twitter X. That's at Stefan Burns Geo. So you can stay up to date in between videos by going there. I understand Twitter is like not the best place, but it's a good place for pushing out updates. And now we've come back down. So that was the G3 storm, and we have the timestamps for our earthquakes. So we'll do this also on the real-time solar wind monitor, but 1400 UTC today was when we had the magnitude 6.9. It was exactly at 1400. And we can see that effectively it ruptured right here. So right after that G3 pulse. And then the magnitude 6 was 1649 UTC. And so we have it right at the very end there. You see I'm reporting on it right after it happened. So 2 big earthquakes immediately after this pulse of activity. And I discussed that in yesterday's live stream about how you have these big geomagnetic fluctuations. And when you have the magnetic field moving, this induces electric currents in anything that's conductive. And so we had strong electric currents flowing across the globe, strongest in the high latitude regions, but also because it's a G3 storm, pretty significant down to mid latitudes and even the equator. You have the ring current flowing around the equator. The whole system gets energized. And it's no surprise then that you get big earthquakes, sometimes lining up with that because perhaps these telluric currents are passing over a fault zone that's ready to go and boom, it happens. Boom shakalaka. So that is what occurred, at least temporally. We had this G3 storm and then immediately afterwards, within a few hours, the 6.9, and then a couple hours after that, the magnitude 6. So that's the sequence of events, and there's more. We had tons of solar activity. We had a big plasma filament blast off of the sun today. Let's look at that coronagraph imagery. Here we have our C3 coronagraph imagery, which allows us to see what's happening with the sun as it relates to the solar wind outflows and also big solar storm launches. Boom shakalaka, check that out. That was from a big plasma filament that launched from the southwest corner of the sun. And just for reference, we use solar coordinate systems. So this would be the west side of the sun. This would be the east side of the sun. So it's flipped in terms of our normal kind of perspective. So southwest corner, and we did have 2 M-class flares that popped off at that time as well. Seem to have destabilized it because as you can see in this footage, the plasma filament blasted off pretty suddenly. But this is something that we see sometimes. Like I really think back to March 28th, when we had the magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar. We also had this big solar flare blast off from the eastern limb of the sun, just rotating into view. And so it's just like sometimes we get these energy spikes that hit the solar system and the earth responds, the sun responds. That's just how I see it, at least, because we see these things connected in time perfectly. So that's what's happened today. The G3 storm, 2 big earthquakes, this blasted off, and we have some big sunspots that are going to be rotating towards Earth direct just in the next day or two. Let's check them out. Here we have our latest sunspot intensitygram, and wow, you can really see that this is becoming quite significant. We've had a lot of flux push out here. This is that zone where we had that action occur with that plasma filament and now that solar storm launching off. That's not Earth direct, by the way. But we see this group here looking bigger and badder and still not yet in the Earth direct zone. So it's just about to get there, not there yet. And when I look at this, we really see this basically is one group, okay? I mean, like you can really look at that right there, and that's a distinct cluster. But we have these other little guys surrounding it, and then we get this big core. That is all effectively working together as one unit, especially if we continue to get more flux there and maybe they even start to like move together. We see that at times. So, and then we have a little bit up there. They're a little further away, but that group right there is looking quite significant. And I would not be surprised if we get something to explode from that during this transit right there, because it just seems to me that we have a lot happening around October 3rd. We have, for example, the moon conjunct Pluto opposite Jupiter around the 1st of October. That's a pretty strong energy signature, Pluto-Jupiter opposition, but the moon slides in and activates the whole configuration. And then afterwards, we had the moon go and reach that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is unfolding right now, and that's opposite Venus. And then we had the full moon, which will be the moon opposite the sun. So there's a lot happening right now in terms of planetary resonances, because the moon is activating these configurations and just strengthening them in general. And so that's one reason why I think we could have more activity. In general, as I've been talking about for a while now, I've been forecasting for October and November to be big months for activity in terms of the sun and perhaps even like earthquakes and more because of all these comets coming in. And I think that is why this solar storm was stronger than expected, because of Comet C2025 R2 SWAN. Let's check it out. Here we have a 3D solar system viewer as provided by The Sky Live, and I'll link this in the video description as well as some other resources as I always do at the bottom, so check that out if you'd like to look at this stuff on your own in between my videos, and that's why I educate you guys so you can do this yourself and not just rely on me. Well, here we have not only 3i Atlas, but also C2025 R2 SWAN right here. And let's go back to today, the 30th of September. We see the Earth, the Sun. There is our comet. That's also the same direction and angle that those big sunspots have formed, right? They just suddenly grew along that vector direction with SWAN, which underwent an outburst just a few days ago. And that outburst was also just a few days after we had those two big nova explosions hit our solar system with their high frequency X-ray and gamma radiation. We see that 3i Atlas is getting close to Mars. Its closest approach is on the 30th, but let's go back in time. Let's actually go all the way back here. So we have now August 30th, and we see R2 SWAN is off to the east solar coordinate system, right? And we go forward in time, we see it sweep by. This is very close to the orbit of Mercury, right? It really got in close. And if I tilt this, look at that, right along the ecliptic plane. So all the planets are traveling along that plane. It's a very important area because the solar wind flows out there, the heliospheric current sheet, the inward flowing radial electric current, all that is basically confined to the ecliptic plane, a little bit above and below it too. So SWAN got in really, really close. Also, you notice Atlas, there 3i Atlas is also closely aligned to the ecliptic plane. So both of these things, this interstellar object and this comet, are interacting with that electrodynamic system that exists in our inner solar system, okay? Well, if I continue to go forward, let me tilt it like that, continue to go forward, you see SWAN there sweep by, and now we're up to today, okay? It effectively loaded a bunch of dust and plasma in this area. And the solar wind is always sweeping by. So anything that gets loaded in here eventually is going to sweep by the Earth because it's always spiraling like this. And so for the past month, this comet, which has this super long tail stretching out, it's a gorgeous comet in the night sky. It's also kind of proving why this is weird because this looks nothing like it, right? People are saying this is a comet, it's an interstellar object. But it was loading this part close to the sun of interplanetary space with a bunch of dust and plasma. And when you have that, you can make the solar wind stronger. So there's a bunch of dust actually in interplanetary space already. You get more dust, that dust will attract these charges to them, whether positive or negative, and now you can create stronger magnetic fields. And it seems that is one reason why this geomagnetic storm is stronger than expected. There are some other influences from that. We'll talk about that in just a bit, but I think a large component of this is because of that loading of dust from this comet, and that helped the magnetic field of the solar wind to strengthen. Now we had that G3 storm. So let's look at our real-time solar wind to investigate that more. Here we have a real-time solar wind for the past 3 days, and as you can see right now as I'm filming this, we are still in G2 conditions. So this is a moderate geomagnetic storm. G1 would be minor, G3 is strong, G2 is moderate. So this has been, a significant storm, not severe or extreme, which would be G4 or G5, but no one was forecasting there to be a G3 storm, myself included. So I did miss this, but we are on top of it right now. We were on top of it yesterday with the live stream. So that is kind of my promise to you, is I'm on top of this stuff as soon as I can be. We see that we ramped up. Well, we notice that we have this increase in the velocity there. That's indicative of some sort of coronal mass ejection, but 723 is quite fast. So clearly we missed some sort of fast structure that launched from the sun. But you will also notice that our interplanetary magnetic field got very strong here, okay? And if you look at the plasma density, it doesn't kind of really explain it. The velocity is not that high at that point. We're only getting this increase in velocity after the main structure pass. You see how this is lined up right there? At one point it actually went to 18 and negative 17. I can get that pretty closely right there. So the normal strength for the interplanetary magnetic field is 5 nanotesla. So to go to 18 is nearly a 4x increase. And you want that BZ component, that vertical component, to be negative to have a strong connection to Earth's magnetic field. And it did that going down to negative 16, negative 17, and staying there for a while. So we have this long duration here where things were more moderate. See that, more moderate in the values, but long duration, building up the activity. And then we got this stronger pulse, and boom, that's when we went G3. That sort of interaction of the comet tail and the dust that's leaving in that part of interplanetary space, now the solar wind eventually will sweep that by the Earth, could explain that pretty nicely. I think there's multiple factors here. We clearly have some sort of fast solar wind structure that hit the Earth, because you don't go up to 700 kilometers per second without that. But we also, I think, had this stronger storm than expected because of the leftover dust and plasma from C2025 R2 SWAN. And well, we have a bunch of comets right now in the inner solar system. So if that dynamic is what's playing out, and let's say a big contributing factor to this, then this October, November, and maybe even into December will probably be pretty dynamic as it relates to this. I also can't talk about this without mentioning the Russell-McLaren effect, which is that you get stronger solar storm impacts and stronger geomagnetic storms after the equinoxes. And specifically for solar cycle maximums, October is the strongest month of the year as it relates to geomagnetic activity. So convergence of factors there leading to this stronger geomagnetic storm than expected, going up to that G3 level. And again, just to mention our earthquakes, let's look at the time. It's 1400 UTC for the magnitude 6.9 right there. So after that big burst of geomagnetic activity, we get that magnitude 6.9. Then the other one was at 1649. So right about here or so, you see that that was also following, and that was actually almost nearly exactly at the peak of that velocity. Really incredible what's been happening with the Earth, the sun, the solar system, the cosmos, because of all these different factors. Solar cycle 25 maximum, one of the strongest years ever on record for earthquake activity. We have all these comets flying in, some very powerful planetary resonances like the Great Conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. That's a 35 to 37 year cycle. And then also the third ever interstellar object observed. The biggest interstellar object observed, highly anomalous. We don't know what it is. It's now just reaching outside of view from Earth in terms of amateur astronomers or radio telescopes, anything like that. It's not really visible now, so we have to rely on our other probes that we have in space. So now we're entering into this period where we really don't know what's going to happen as it relates to all these factors, how they combine. And this is the one phrase that popped in my head right now, is that you can have something be more than just the sum of its parts. So the whole is greater than the sum. So 1 + 1 + 1 = 4. That's what happens when there's synergy. And we're talking about synergy here. How all these things connect together is very synergistic. So I will keep you up to date with what is happening every step of the way if you subscribe to the channel. And here we have a wave visualization for that magnitude 6.9 earthquake in the Philippines. And we're looking at North America and the North American Seismic Network. They produce these visualizations for that. I would find one that's closer if I could, but I haven't found one. But this is still interesting because that earthquake in the Philippines happened way far away from the United States, from Canada, from Mexico, yet it was still picked up by this North American Seismic Network. You can see these waves start to come in, especially here in California where we have a high density of seismometers. And you'll notice that there's just in general some noise there already existing, but look at these waves sweeping through. Red is positive up motion, blue is down motion. And so you see how you get the ground basically undulating like this, not only in the Philippines and not only in Southeast Asia, but all the way across the world in North America and Europe. The entire globe experienced the seismic waves from that magnitude 6.9 because that is a strong earthquake. So we'll see if there is a significant aftershock, magnitude 6 or so. Maybe it's a foreshock. I don't think so, but we'll have to wait and see. Interesting, actually, I'll just share this with you. I was reading through my dream journal last night, and back in May, I had a dream about a magnitude 8.2 earthquake hitting New Zealand. So take that for what you will, but I didn't really remember that until I read my journal. It's like, oh, that's odd. So big earthquake in the Philippines, magnitude 6 earthquake also in Indonesia, and we still have a lot left in 2025. We have these very strong space weather influences, as well as these planetary resonances and all these comets in Interstellar Object 3I Atlas. So this end of year and going into 2025 is going to be intense. That is at least what I think, and that's what I'm feeling too. And one thing, a sneak preview of the beginning of 2026, let's look at the incredible planetary geometry that is setting up right at the beginning of January. Here we have an application called Solar System Scope, which allows us to see the relative orbits and positions of the planets. They are not to scale, but besides that, everything is pretty accurate. So we have our date here, September 30th. Let me drag the Earth forward in time, and you'll notice this incredible planetary geometry suddenly emerge in the inner solar system going out to Jupiter. So this is what we have right now. And before that, actually, I should just show you this really quick. There is that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So we do have this strong alignment there. They go exactly conjunct February. I think it's like February 20th, something like that. But let me zoom forward here. You'll notice Mercury right there, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. Watch what happens right at the end of January, or beginning of January. Just like this, we're at the end of December. There's January, boom. We get this incredible alignment between the planets. So see that line right there? This is January 9th. And I think the 6th is actually slightly better for this, right around there or so. But anywhere from like the beginning of January to the middle of January, we have this incredible alignment between the planets going all the way out to Jupiter. Mercury is a little skew there, but the biggest planets are all participating in this line. In general, Mercury is so close that it's contributing to this geometry. And then at the same time, you have this alignment there. If we look heliocentric, that alignment there is quite significant too. So, and if we zoom out even further, you have to remember that Uranus and Pluto are still in a trine and also sextile to these right there. So 120 degrees between them and 60 degrees between Neptune and Saturn for these two. So a really significant configuration involving all the planets at the beginning of January. I don't know what this means. I'm not going to tell you that we're guaranteed to have a huge volcanic eruption or a big earthquake or some massive solar storm. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. This energy could also express itself societally, consciously perhaps, but we do have this alignment. I've been talking about this now for more than a year on and off, just when it gets brought up, but this is now rapidly approaching after we have all this activity in October and November. So I will keep you up to date on this as well. And if you'd like to stay up to date on what's happening with the Earth in general, all these things, then please subscribe to the channel. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all for your support. Smash that like button to help the channel grow. We're about to blast past 500,000 subscribers. So love to see you join in on the Soul Tribe before we do, and then we march onwards in our understanding and exploration of the Earth, the Sun, the solar system, and the cosmos. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. Say some prayers for all those affected by the earthquakes today, and I'll see you all in the next video.